Hi there, welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth, or welcome back, whatever the case may be. I'm Anah Parreli, and today we're going to be talking about the ruling number 3 and the attributes of the ruling number 3 for the people that we meet in our lives. Now, it should be a bit more interesting than the usual ruling numbers because this number is found frequently, shall we like. It's not a rare number. But it does have some distinctive patterns to it, and those patterns can be positive or negative in the same way that all numbers can. But I sort of find, I think, that with the number 3, there is some extremes, if you like. So I'm going to be using some examples, more than one person today, as far as famous people go, to talk about how the ruling number influences them. And we will be talking about my experiences of people with a ruling 3 because I do actually have a lot of experience because they're so common, I guess, or you can find them in so many different places. So I shouldn't say that they're common. That makes it sound like the people are common. That's not the case. The frequency of the ruling number is common, and that's the point I'm trying to make, with some really interesting dynamics attached to it. So before we get into talking about the specifics of the ruling number 3, just a reminder that all ruling numbers are the sum of the total numbers in the birth date, reduced down to a singular primary number between 1 to 9, unless there's the specific, unless they equate to the numbers 11 or 22, in which case they're considered to be master numbers. And they're said to have a specific power if they're a master number. But we'll be talking about them in another video, and you'll get more information about it then. So the other thing that we've also discussed previously is that the Pythagorean numerology concepts are those where numbers will vibrate to either the feminine or the masculine. Even numbers are considered to be feminine, and they're associated with the colour silver, whereas the odd numbers, such as the 3, are associated with the colour gold. They're considered to be masculine, and they're associated with the sun. So it would be easy to deduce, based on these concepts, that people with a ruling number of 3 tend to be very practical. The ruling number 3 is the first number of the mind plane on the birth chart. We'll be having a look at that later in this video, and it can be calculated via the sequences that are here. So if you add up the birth date, the day, the month, and the year, and it comes to the total of 12, then it's a 3. Another way of making it is if they come to 21, 30, 39 will break down to a 3 as well, because it reduces down to a 12. 9 plus 3 is 12, and then 2 plus 1 equals 3. And that's the same way that we make 3 from 48. So 4 plus 8 is 12. 1 plus 2 equals 3. So, of course, this is how we bring it down. Now, one of the things that I've observed, and I'm quite comfortable to put this in here, is that people with a ruling number, in my observations with the 3, they really struggle to put healthy boundaries in place. And this is largely because they don't like to disappoint people, so they struggle to say the word no. And we'll have a look at that later in this video as well, but it's just something worth mentioning. They're generally very kind people. So speaking of the general observation with boundaries that I've made, people with a ruling 3 also carry these general attributes. They're generally very happy, optimistic people. They are a ray of sunshine when they're living upwardly. They have a brilliant sense of humour and a very quick and sharp wit, and it can be hilariously funny, and this is why they're considered to be so bright. They're definitely very multi-talented. They can turn their hand to anything and make a success of it, probably with greater ease than many of the rest of us. And this is largely because they do tend to have a fertile imagination, being on the mind plane and being thinkers. They're creative thinkers, and they can often be found performing in the arts, if you like, even with artistic pursuits, because they can be quite gifted at painting and things like that, but they're certainly good at things like writing, performing music, or any kind of activity that involves design and planning. So in my experience of people with the 3s, not only do they have that artistic capacity, because they've got this multi-talent aspect to them as well, they generally tend to be very good in business. They seem to have a lucky trait, And lucky as in they probably gamble. This is part of the boundary issues that I've observed, not with all people, but certainly with men. They don't mind, what do they call it, a flutter on the horses or whatever. And they seem to have a winning edge, I might add, which is a little frustrating for the rest of us that don't gamble. Or who, when we do decide to have a little bit of a flutter, we never seem to come out on top. But the number threes do seem to do well in these kind of things. I would also state that they're very charismatic and they do tend to be liked by people from all genders. And this is largely because even though a lot of the time the humour is completely inappropriate because it is so sharp and quick, even if it's inappropriate, people are left with no option but to laugh, and they tend to make excuses for their inappropriate humour because it's just so quick and fast, and it catches people by surprise. What else can I say about them? Just that basically this optimistic nature that they have about them, it's not just an external facade. They generally are very optimistic internally as well. So we would call that their inner and outer reality of optimism that surrounds threes in general. So it's their quick intellect that is their life path, if you like. They bring that to other people's lives. They've got that very fast processing aspect. They can see a problem, process it, and come up with a solution very quickly and with practical outcomes and results. So they can bring that to the table with other people as well. If other people speak to them and say, look, I've got a problem, or just actually my experience of watching them when they're looking at the news or something like that, they'll see bigger problems as well, and they'll be able to come up with the solutions very quickly. However, it's getting or having them in positions where they can influence with this sound logic, if you like. That would probably be part of their life path where they can make a difference to humanity. But I would say that probably the greatest gift that they bring is this optimism for the future. Whenever they do their planning or whenever they're thinking, they do come up with very sound solutions. And these sound solutions are because of this capacity that they have to look at a problem and analyse it. They'd be very competent researchers or in the fields of research should they turn their hand that way. And the other thing is that, of course, their personality is one that brightens everybody, generally speaking, certainly when they're living upwardly, because they are so funny and so quick and they can find the humour in any situation. They're an absolute joy to be around. So when we talk about the distinctive traits of the ruling three, we can often find these people that at the centre of a party. They do enjoy their social time, and they generally enjoy social gatherings. This is unless certain things have taken place, which we'll discuss later on. But generally speaking, when living upright, they enjoy a party. They're usually the centre of it, generally because actually they've that sharp humour and quick wit that they've got. They use within their social circles, and that becomes very charismatic to the people around them. What was I going to say about that? The thing with the ruling three is, even if that biting humour is inappropriate, it can leave people gasping, to be honest. But even then, people generally are not offended by the ruling three unless they go too far with their inappropriate humour, because it remains funny simply because the quickness, it's unexpected when the cracks are made, and people can't help but laugh at the fact that their mind processes so quickly. I just clicked my fingers then if you heard that. But the other thing is they do like to be very helpful to people. They don't, certainly within their family units or the people that they care about. So if you're in a partnered relationship with somebody that's ruling three, they do struggle, as I said, to say the word no. So they will, even if they don't want to do something, if you say, would you mind, could you, I'd like for you, they may not say yes. They may just get up and go and do it, whatever it is that you're wanting, because quite simply, they want to make you happy. But the problem is that it's a boundary on that. They can actually, if they've said yes too many times when they should have been saying no, then they may end up having a bit of an explosion afterwards if they snap. This is what I've observed, and what I'm aware of is certainly the advice that I give my clients is strategy around how to say no when they're not comfortable saying no. But anyway, moving on, that'll be in the advice section. For now, the distinctive traits are that they do make excellent hosts and hostesses, probably because they do enjoy the fruits of their labour and the good fortune. And while they're not super materialistic, they do enjoy the quality, that whole attitude of why buy nylon if you can afford silk is a prime example. They may struggle to express themselves emotionally. They're more likely to convey their thoughts and ideas, as I just discussed, certainly not through speaking about feelings, probably more about physical demonstrations. They do have a love of freedom, and this includes travel because this helps to broaden their outlook of the world and their insight into people and culture. And going back to their materialistic side, they are materialistic, but not in the same way as those people that we would call really good at manifestation, because although the 3 is good at manifestation, they don't actively sit there thinking about, how can I make millions of dollars? Well, actually, sometimes they do, just depends. But it's not normally in the same, it's difficult to explain. I think that their desire for wealth is because they find themselves in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people that show them opportunities such as jobs and career opportunities or investment opportunities. And this is generally because obviously they're moving in these social circles, and their character tends to act as a magnet to people that actually genuinely and willingly and sincerely are trying to share beneficial information because they like the person. So I guess we could say that they're good networkers. And because they are such quick thinkers, they're very good at seeing and processing opportunities to see which is beneficial for them. Now, who doesn't like money? Let's be real. Money does enhance the quality of life. It's not everything, but if you have none, obviously life is not quite as enjoyable. If you're a 3, you can't travel if you don't have money. Prime example. And that's something they look forward to. So I would say that the 3s that I've met, they are money motivated. They are definitely good bean counters, but they're not ones that sit there thinking about how to do a global takeover. They're more interested in how to build a solid source of income for themselves, and probably with the least amount of effort, actually, because they do enjoy their social time. So they want to still be able to have that and to be able to travel. So I guess the other key factor here is that with their humour, this is going towards a negative trait actually, is that they can be quite intolerant of other people that don't have these same rapid fire and cutting capacity to analyse and process. So, yeah, I think that can be it. I think I'll share the other one in negative traits. That's what I'll do. All right, so I'll speak to you on the next slide. So we all have negative tendencies and we have positive tendencies as well, and the ruling 3 is no different. For the ruling 3 though, this sensitive to other people's feelings, because feelings and emotions is not their forte actually for the ruling 3, they can appear to be very, very critical and insensitive to others. And if you're living at home with these people, the criticism may become incessant fault finding in other people, and that can be a huge, I've got the word burdensome here, but I think that's too polite, that can be a huge pain in the backside for people that have got to live with them. And this is because although it's joking because of this sharp humour, as said, we all love their sharp humour, but if it's got that sniping, biting, catty edge to it, and the person is exhibiting this 24/7 and you're stuck in the house with them, it might have been a bit difficult for people during the COVID period. That can be very wearing to people, when all you're hearing is people saying, oh, look at that, they might be talking about the TV, but it's this constant from the outside nitpicking, if you like, or devaluation or whatever. I mean, these people are not... when I say the comments that the 3 would be making, it's not directed towards the people in the house generally, probably towards characters on TV or whatever, and that can just be a source of frustration for people. Okay, so then the other thing is the difficulty in maintaining healthy boundaries can, as I said before, often result in temperamental explosions. Now, this tends to happen more so with men than with women, although I have had women tell me that yes, they also experience it. And at least one woman that I can think of, she told me that by the time she was about 45, 50, she actually was refusing to socially engage with other people because she felt that she'd been used and abused because of her inability to say no to people. And she just became tired. She felt that she was being taken advantage of. And she figured the best way for her to deal with that was actually to socially exclude herself, which is a little sad. So, obviously, in her situation, I gave a strategy for saying no. Now, another thing that will help a ruling 3 is actually the video that I'm working on at the moment, which is about friendship circles and knowing your limits, because this is so vitally important for the ruling 3, but I'll talk about that on the slide for advice. Okay, so the other negative tendencies is that because the personality type of the 3, look, I've got to say all of them, they can, not all of them, I hope I was clear with that. It's not all people, but there can be a tendency for a bit of Machiavellian approach to life if they're not checked, right? And by that I'm talking about money and opportunities. And it's very easy for those people in their social circle, or close to them, not their social circle, to start to feel used and abused by them. And I don't believe that in most instances that this quality that we can perceive to be Machiavellian is a calculated lack of care for people. It's simply a boundary issue. That's all. They don't actively seek to abuse the kindness or generosity of people. It's just poor impulse control, in my observations. Because I think you can identify it, because if you were actually to pull the person up the ruling 3 and say, are you ever going to phone me up and just ask me how I'm feeling? Or when do you ask me how I feel? Or how about consulting with me before you turn around and say, I'm going to lob in at your house? This is just for example. They will be quite appalled that they've been so insensitive. They may actually even beat themselves up. Okay, so I don't believe that they do this deliberately, but the other thing is pull them up, because they will change and modify their behaviour. And part of this is because this is my opinion of what's going on here. The boundary issue translates over to them putting limits on themselves as well. Quite often, because of this impulse control, they'll just run out and do stuff without giving any great thought to it. Now, there is also some advice I've got for them. Let's look at that now. So obviously the best advice for anybody, not just the ruling number 3, is that they should take responsibility for their own actions and not blame others for the negative events and experiences that can occur in your lives. Now, this also is the same, it's got relevance here with the ruling 3 because of this inappropriate humour that they often have, and they can take it too far and obviously end up getting some consequences that they don't like to have. I mean, as they grow and mature, they will shift away from this behaviour, as with all the numbers. But the other things that are specific information for the ruling 3 is to not scatter too much of their energy too much, basically to be able to focus. Because of their vitality and their self-confidence, and because they've got this wonderful positive disposition, they can gain the support of many other people, and as I said before, these opportunities that come their way. Now, if they become too fragmented, obviously it's going to take a toll on their optimism. So it's important that they retain a balance of their energy and associations, if you like, and that they take time out for self-care. That could be meditation. The inherent lack of empathy, unless it shows up in the birth chart somewhere else or with their day number. That's why I say, once again, it's not one size fits all. They may need to focus on their spiritual growth and development, but it may also be accommodated in other areas of their numerology report, shall we say. Okay, they always do. I think the reminder is whatever challenges that the ruling number 3 will have, is they need to be reminded they've got the capacity to bounce back, all right? Because that's just who they are. They're just optimistic. They're very beautiful people. And so there is a warning here. As I say this, I can hear people going, well, I know threes that aren't that way. Look, we all know people that don't fit the mold of any particular thing, but I'm going to offer you a bit more of an explanation here. While the threes are really very positive people, very optimistic, very kind, loving people, in my experience, there is a tendency for them to become caught up and trapped in the negative energies because they are on the mind plane, of course, of worrying, depression, gossip, frivolity, and extravagance, and all the limitations that these things can bring to them. Now, the other thing I did mention, I'm just checking here if I've got it in here. Okay, it's probably that Machiavellian element. Yeah, to invest some time into the relationships would be the best thing, and that's being mindful of your boundaries. And when we talk about being mindful of boundaries, there's also a case of know your limits, right? Use some self-discipline. Put checks on your behaviour. This is for these really sharp, biting, witty people. And learn to develop that sensitivity towards others and apply them to yourself as well. Because where I've alluded in previous videos that I have been working in psychiatric residential facilities, there was, and this is the big one, I put my own personal theory to the test, and I did confirm that there was a prevalence of people with a ruling number 3, and to a lesser extent a day number of 3, that had experienced what some might call a nervous breakdown. So I would say unofficially that there seems to be a greater susceptibility, and it would be really interesting to know or to have some research behind that to establish why. I think I do know why, because obviously working with the people, certainly within that little pocket, there seemed to be an overabundance of these people with the ruling 3 with a lack of personal discipline, lack of boundaries, not able to identify when people were attempting to exploit them. And because they struggled to say no, and because they were kind people, they were more susceptible to being, shall we say, abused by questionable characters. And then that would impact dreadfully on them. They just wouldn't understand why, things like that. I'm not going to go into why each person had their scenario, but suffice to say, what I established through my interactions with them, that they were just really beautiful people, and it was just so sad to see them put through all of that pain. So my reminder once again is they can recover. They can recover with support. So the advice is pay attention to the boundaries. The video that I'm working on at the moment is one about evaluating friendships and that kind of thing. And I would recommend that everybody, but particularly the 3, because of this, you may as well say vulnerability to exploitation because of the inability to say no. This will help them to identify their limits within a relationship and when to try and distance themselves a little bit while they strengthen themselves. So we can distance, but it doesn't mean we cut people off. Anyway, so a tip that I'm going to give here, because we are talking about 3s, is that if you struggle to say no, there's different ways you can say no. So give it a practice, right? No, I can't. Sorry, right? Or try this and look at yourself in the mirror so that you can see the courage of your own conviction. No, I'm not able to. Sorry. Or no, I'm busy. And you don't even need to put the word sorry on afterwards. You can just say no. You don't need to justify. You can say, look, I'm unable to do this. But I suggest you practice saying no. And until you've got the strength to say no, I always said to the clients, it's not a good long-term solution, but it's an okay short one. And that's the avoidance strategy, which is, oh, I'm sorry, I can't speak right now. Can I call you back? Or if they ask you to do something, oh, I'm not sure I can do that. I'll have to check, if they're taking advantage of you. Let me know. I'll get back to you. And then go home and practice saying no, and then phone them up and say, look, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Whatever. These are just some strategies to employ. So in regard to suitable vocations for the ruling 3, this information is directly taken actually from the research conducted by Dr. David Phillips back in the 80s or before, earlier, I guess. So your feedback, particularly in regard to this this information actually would be quite relevant and inform me as part of my ability to do meaningful numerology reports. But basically, from his perspective, because of the astuteness of the mind, people with a ruling 3 would do very well in areas such as accountancy and the sciences. But they also, according to him, have a natural leaning because of this inquiry of the mind, this questioning nature that they've got, that they can research unprompted. So research may be an area that is something that they would consider from a employment perspective. Other things are business management, because they're definitely good managers. If they're into IT, because of this inquisitive mind, they'd be good at IT programming. And even the academics. Now, he says some may excel in the arts or as critics of the arts. Well, I think most definitely they would, and we're going to be looking at that more specifically when we look at famous threes, because there's an abundance of them in the arts. So now we're going to look at the more specifics of each individual number. They will still carry the general attributes of the 3, but the way the 3 is calculated is more personalized, if you like. So this vibration, the 12-3, has a vibration of intuition and perception, sacrifice and courage. Now, when we talk about pathways, remember we're talking about a life pathway. So you might meet somebody with this sequence now that haven't or can't demonstrate these attributes, but by the end of their life, presuming they have a long life, they will have actually achieved these goals. So these people know that there is a divine purpose, and their purpose is to seek the truth and to understand the meaning of universal love, wisdom, and strength of will. Where other people see imbalance, the 12-3 sees that there is a bigger picture and that there is a universal balance, and that challenges are not punishments, but rather they're experiences or opportunities to experience and grow from, much like what we see in the tarot as the Wheel of Fortune, where what goes up must come down and vice versa. They're just part of life. So this sequence is less attached to the material possessions and money, and this gives them a greater compassion and freedom within the world, and isn't as focused on satiating those physical wants and material needs, okay? They develop a deep understanding of these whole universal processes of faith and acceptance, and they're able to shine a light for others. And this includes challenging other people's beliefs in limitation as part of opening their mind. And this is where there is that need for courage, because not everybody welcomes having the status quo challenged, or to have the way, if they're a bit narrow-minded and you probe and you poke the person with narrow-mindedness to get them to think about, well, why do you think that, and to think about the logic and rationale of the beliefs that they hold. Some people react quite badly to it, and this is why courage is involved. And in fact, it's probably why these people can do what they do, because if they're not focused on material success, it's like, well, what can you take from me? I've already got everything that I want. You want to sabotage my career because I challenged your thinking? They're less vulnerable if they have released and sacrificed certain aspects of life. So there you go. It's also associated, by the way, with the Hanging Man in the tarot deck, and you can see that he's always in the process of contemplation, moving forward, retreat, think, step forward. That's the basically the card associated with the ruling 12-3. So for the 21-3, it's more about uniting the material and the spiritual planes as part of balance and growth, because this is where the power lies, of course. When there is an acceptance of life and its trials and challenges as being part of helping to develop self-discipline, skill and wisdom, and this will be developed with patience and caution, these people will develop the attributes that are needed for success and honour, and they could actually be recognised for their astute, if you like, shrewd and practical ideas, right? While the other thing is too that they may actually direct this energy into artistic expression. I probably should do a bit of research on famous artists, actually, painters and that kind of stuff, sculptors. I haven't done that yet. Anyway, they would be encouraged to participate in travelling the world, if you like, because that will help them to expand their consciousness of the cosmos, the world, and it will also help them to learn to use self-control and to be selective around the environments in which they find themselves in, so that they don't negatively impact or influence on their inner balance, if you like, because it's in this way that they'll lighten the path of many people, and they'll be able to inspire them through the use of, through exhibiting their faith and wisdom, their understanding of the world. That's how they will get their messages across and live their path. I guess with ruling numbers, the 30/3 is probably the one that's most aligned with the truth of a 3, if we like, the ruling number. Because for these people, it's all about charm and hard work. And where we talk about the general aspects of the ruling 3 being charismatic and all of that, this is very much the case for people with a ruling 3. Their power lies in the fact that they're happy and charming, they're optimistic, they're energetic, they're enthusiastic about life. They tend to be comfortable with themselves in romantic relationships, and they're generally seeking harmony and emotional compatibility. They are definitely ambitious, and they will work very hard to achieve their desired goals. As I said before, not necessarily to be the manager or to launch a business like Amazon, but certainly to be a business owner or to be self-employed, in control of their own destiny, if you like. So when they take charge of their energy and direct it with determination and self-discipline, they have the capacity for the highest levels of attainment. Now, this is because within their work, they're very precise and they take pride in doing work well. Once again, creativity comes to the fore. They are very creative, artistic and gifted, and they have that very alert and active mind, and they are interested in higher realms of philosophy and spiritual achievement. So when we talk about the fact that they're very focused on logical and practical pursuits, it doesn't necessarily come at the exclusion of spirituality. It's just about priorities, I guess. In fact, I know 3s that are deeply spiritual, and they actually are quite open to spirit communication, telepathy, things like that. So it doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just means that it's generally not their priority, and it happens by default, perhaps just because of their character traits. Anyway, they're able to inspire people. This pathway is the ability to inspire people to conduct themselves more ethically, and to have more ethical attitudes to life, right? They can, why did I say right? Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. They lighten the paths of many through their gifts, of course, of inspiration, hope and faith, right? They are absolute blessings to the world, especially when living upright. So people with a numerical sequence of a 39/12/3, their personality is a bit like a knight in shining armor, because they will fight and defend their ideas and ideals with enthusiasm in ways that inspire others. So they have a certain nobility and, as far as ideals go, admirable qualities, if you like, practical, philosophical and spiritual. And when it's combined with self-discipline, it can really be of benefit to humanity. That's largely because the sequence has a greater empathy than the other ruling 3s, and personally I suspect it's because it's got the number 2 in it. It breaks down to a 12, and 2 tends to carry empathy and intuition with it as a value. So this might explain the emotional aspects and elements of this particular sequence. But I've got to say, when it comes to the defender of the vulnerable, I have actually seen that displayed with other numerological sequences, and that includes actually the 30/3. I have seen them leap up to protect those they consider to be vulnerable, and be shot down in a in a barrage of flames, perhaps because there is that tendency there that when we're defending to come in forcefully, and maybe that's a thing with the 30/3, they're more forceful when they jump in, so they end up being accused of being bullies themselves, whereas this is not the case with the 39/12/3. I think it's because they have a gentler approach. So these are the people that carry the attitude of I love everyone and everyone loves me. They've got a certain confidence about them, and they do tend to be surrounded by peace and people that have a sense of camaraderie or brotherhood, sisterhood, if you like. And their wisdom emanates, this sequence, from their care and their concern for humanity. It's a very powerful vibration that lends itself to the teaching realms, if you like, or activities and humanitarian service. But they must be very careful to not allow themselves to become immersed in fantasies or to develop a tunnel vision. Or have an unrealistic grip of reality. And I would take it a little bit further and say they must maintain reasonable expectations of others and of humanity, because with this expansive vision that they have of humanitarian care and and I'm just trying to think how I would phrase this actually. You know what it's like. People have a vision of what would be the right way to do things. Because they've got this humanitarian care and natural empathy towards others, they want to reduce the suffering that people go for. And invariably, if we've got high expectations, we can be disappointed if those expectations are unreasonable. In fact, actually, I'll give a prime example of this that might inflame people, but let's just say that somebody with this numerological sequence would have been the one that was protesting when Australia set up the islands, and, rightly so. From my perspective, locking people up for years at a time, 10 decades without a trial, and shoving them on an island in the middle of nowhere. These people would be the resistors for that, and they would potentially, if they're unrealistic, hold expectations that the government would respond in a humanitarian way. And the very fact that Australia kept these people on those islands for as long as what they did, and the harm that was happening to the people on the islands, which is not generally spoken about, would have caused these people horrendous grief, and that would potentially lead them into a state of depression, which would then undermine their capacity to do their humanitarian service work, if you like. So I'm not saying don't hold expectations, because we all hope for the best, but it's be realistic. Irresponsible governments will justify why they treat people cruelly, in my opinion. Sorry, that's a bit of a judgment on my part, but it's just something there to be mindful. I hope I've conveyed it correctly, but by all means, put your comments below, okay? I'm not saying that anybody should do, or governments should do X or Y. I'm just saying that I also have a humanitarian and compassionate aspect to myself, and I would prefer not to see people suffer. So the 48/12/3, that's actually a really interesting number consequence, because it's really associated with success that comes to them without a lot of effort on their part. I'm referring to material and financial success here. It's probably because of their magnetic aspect of drawing good financial opportunities for them, that quick, shrewd analysis. They're able to process quickly and establish what's a good investment, what isn't. They draw the right people to them because of this magnetic personality that they have, and because of their humour. Humour is underneath all threes, okay? So they're very attractive to other people. At the same time, with this number sequence, they are well aware that money alone is not enough to feel fulfilled. So they will obviously look to other areas to seek this emotional fulfillment that they're after, which is, obviously something to be admired. And this will often take them down a pathway of humanitarian concern. Now, while there is the capacity for material success, they place a higher value on people as opposed to money. Once again, admirable. However, there's a real risk that they might actually turn their back on financial or material pursuits, which, is understandable if they've got a human conscience, because we see this quite a lot with people with New Age philosophies anyway, of human service. But within the context of the 48.3, if they do this, they're actually going against their divine path, because they can do more, because they're so astute financially and they're this, you may as well say, money magnet. They can do more with their financial success for people than if they were to go and volunteer their time and actively immerse themselves physically in the humanitarian causes. And by this as an example is of how this might work and why the money side is so important within these people's endeavours, is they're going to be able to do a lot more for people. Let's say that they were concerned about homeless people. They would be able to do a lot more for them if they went and use their money to build premises, if you like, than what they would be able to achieve for humanity if they just went and donated a couple of hours. I don't know if they do sausage sizzles where you are, but if we go down to the hardware shop, there's always somebody at the front doing a fundraiser and throwing sausages over the barbecue, selling them for $2 a pop, or I think it might be $4 now. But either way, that's a much harder way to make money. If these people want to pursue their humanitarian regard, it would be like, just go and do what comes naturally to you. You're a financial magnet. Everything you touch turns to gold. You've got the Midas hand. And yep, you're right, money's not everything, but you can direct that money into positive pursuits to help many, many people, many more people than if you're out there treading the beaten path, if you like. And one of the things I thought as I was doing this slide was, if they earned enough money, actually I should do a numerology on Jeff Bezos, but let's say Jeff Bezos was ruling 48.12. With the amount of money that he has earned and made through Amazon, if I've got it all right, the amount of money that they could direct into charitable organisations to assist people and empower them to live well and live happily, they could do it, right? But this is the example that I'm making with the 48.12.3. This is why money is important. It's part of their path that they do it. But at the same time, they also are intuitive, artistic, persistent. They're very dependable, but they also do have that mischievous sense of humour. They do have an empathy that's not always healthy, because they can absorb the feelings of others. So the suggestion here would be that they pay special attention to maintaining their energetic health and do things like the spiritual hygiene, which of course we've got videos up here. They may need to, at times, be supported by those people around them and reminded, stay positive, believe in themselves, and continue to hold faith for the future. So there is no shortage of famous ruling threes, and many of them live positively, of course. John Travolta, everybody knows him. He's certainly been very successful. He's certainly had a lot of very big spiritual trials or emotional trials. He's lost 3 of the most important women in his life to breast cancer, and he also lost his son when his son was a child. I don't think anybody would speak negatively of him, although he's associated with Scientology, and Scientology gets a really bad rap. I'm not going to go into that. Pope Francis, of course, he is a ruling 3, and he rocked the Vatican, so he's a bit of a, they call them mover and a changer. He rocked the Vatican because he refused to conform to certain expectations of a pope, and he chose to live outside of the Vatican apartments and live a more humble lifestyle. In fact, it's reasonably well known, but you might not know, and you might know, that before he became pope, there'd been a big shift away from Catholic parishioners. They had, obviously Catholicism has copped a bad rap for a few decades now, and when he became pope, because of his humour and humility, many of the flock have been drawn back to church, allegedly, I say. Then another famous 3 is Jodie Foster. She lives an incredibly private life these days, so we don't hear much about her. In her child life, she was in the public eye all the time. And in fact, from what I understand, she started to put those boundaries and parameters around her private life because she was being stalked by John Hinckley, who, if you don't know, because you might be too young, he attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, who was then the president of the US, to get her approval. Well, basically for her attention, I guess. John Hinckley stated that he was seeking her attention. That's what he's been publicly put on the record for. So anyway, I think it would be very interesting to do the birth chart on all of these individuals, but because there's so many famous threes, I actually want to explore some of the ones that are negative or have followed the path away from their potential, for a better description, because there seems to be an abundance of them as well. So let's crack on. So don't shoot me yet when I put up Ricky Gervais as one of the first famous threes that is not necessarily adhering to his true potential, although obviously he's received he's had a lot of success because of his biting wit. And you can see in interviews or his performances that he often gets away with things regardless of how inappropriate the comments are. Now, I'm not a fan of him because, and I will do this as personal, it's based on my experience. Many years ago, I was using Facebook, and Ricky Gervais actually was not that well known in Australia, and I'm not sure just how popular he is in Australia, but what I can say is that I hadn't heard of him, and I'd been living in remote areas for a while, and I didn't always have access to the TV, and the TV was not a big part of my life. And certainly when we're living in remote areas, we don't always get to see what's happening from an entertainment perspective in the UK, shall we say. But suffice to say, I went onto Facebook and I saw Ricky. Turns out he was actually having a joke, because I actually personally interacted with the guy. Because I pulled him up, I wasn't aware that he was a comedian, and what I saw, his humour didn't translate into the written word. And what I saw, instead of somebody that was having a joke and being comic, I saw somebody being particularly cruel to another person, and I was quite offended on their behalf. And I made a crack. I pulled him up and I said, look, that's completely inappropriate. It's actually cruel. He decided that it was worth getting into me about the fact that I had no sense of humour. I think in his defence to me, he mentioned something like, I'm a famous comedian and where have you been? You know, obviously. My response to that was, I am Australian, is all I can say. I grew up in the bush, and I think Australians are quite notorious for, we don't care who you are, we don't care where you're from, we don't care what your title is. But if you think that just because you've got a title you can get away with treating people abominably, we will step up to the plate and put you in your place. So suffice to say, my defender came out, as well as my Leo Passion and Fire Warrior, so I gave him a right gobful, and suffice to say, he put me on block after giving me a bit of gaff back. And I remember after that I made a personal decision that I would never ever watch anything that he was in, including interviews. Now, I've kind of maintained that because I just can't condone cruelty, okay? Even if it's a use of humour in the process. What I did do, though, that is interesting is that when I was preparing for this, I saw an interview come up about him where apparently he'd made sacrifices of his career to make a point or whatever. So I actually, for the first time ever, went and watched this, and I thought, no, I don't agree that he sacrificed his career. I can think that, you know, by this we're talking about his award ceremony and with the cracks that he made where he offended everybody, and he was very clear through this performance, if you like, that he really didn't care what people thought. And I thought, well, that's pretty true, actually, of a three, now that I know he's got a ruling three, that he won't care because he thinks it's funny. Now, as I explained to you, with a ruling three, they do have a very punchy and inappropriate sense of humour, and for most of us, we will laugh. The problems for a three is when they cross the line with their humour and it bounces back at them, and this is what I feel has happened with this award ceremony. He did not exhibit self-discipline. there was a lack of self-mastery in regard to his boundaries. Now, I saw also on this video where people were defending him, saying, oh, he's just saying the truth and these people deserved it. Well, one of the lines that I saw come across was where at the same ceremony he made a crack that Dame Judi Dench licked her own private parts. Now, that's where I see these kind of comments are uncalled for, they're unwarranted, they're completely inappropriate, and they're actually personal attacks. And if we look at what is respectful and what isn't, you know, you can't tell me that Dame Judi Dench would be comfortable with that, right? Of course, there were other inappropriate jokes, you know, that were funny, but he crossed a line. Now, what I don't like about him, and this is why I say that I'm not convinced that his intention was to identify social injustices or incongruence. It was pretty egotistical because he's judged, or not judged, he's justified his humour by saying that he was in character when he was delivering those awards. Well, I say, mate, at the end of the day, if you really did put however many hours into the planning and preparation of these jokes, there were a couple of factors you didn't look at. One is you were in the US, right? And you did not prepare for your audience. So he was lacking in awareness of the audience that he was delivering the jokes to. And he should have identified that he was in character when he was making these jokes. And I think at the end of the day, when we hear people justifying, so I'm going to narrow in on this comment about Dame Judi Dench, right? If the guy had any decency, he wouldn't be turning around and saying, I was in character. He would be saying, yeah, you're right. I crossed the line with that one. And I'm sorry, you know, make a public apology to Dame Judi Dench. Now, what am I going to say? There are other things involved with his chart here. You can see that actually, look, I would say he is actually a feelings person, but he also is a Cancer sign. So they're definitely very sensitive as well. Look, I would just say at his age, he should have known better when he was delivering that and not to make excuses for it. Own it, deal with it, apologise, grow up, right? And in future, make sure you know your audience and make sure you don't cross a line. That would be my advice to him. So, in regard to Queen Victoria, she also was a ruling 3, and we don't see a lot of information about her as to whether or not she had a sense of humour. We do see that I would perceive that she certainly lived with depression after the death of her husband, if not before. We Initially, I was going to say that, you know, we don't see her doing terribly much for the world actually during her reign. But in fairness, if I remove my judgment from it, during her reign, when you think about the fact that Australia was a colony built on convict labour and where the convicts were treated absolutely abominably, I might add, during her reign, we actually saw the transportation of convicts stop, and we saw Australia become an independent colony, if you like. That's when we formed our own government, I think, very close to that time frame. So she would have been part of doing that. But when we talk about lack of boundaries, there is still the issue that even if there is not a case of invading countries, she certainly influenced within Australia the social structure. Was very much based on Victorian England, and that included cultural behaviours as well, such as the wearing of black for when there was a death in the family. I've got memories, having spoken to our family matriarch who died a few years ago, that even in her time, that once somebody had died, all the old girls, we call them, they were always wearing black and in almost a perpetual state of mourning. The other thing, of course, is with the boundaries, is within her family life. She definitely embedded herself into the lives of her children as far as orchestrating marriages and these kind of things. Other less known facts about the Queen would include her reliance on substances. And I've seen that there's mixed information there about whether or not she was an addict. But I believe that she certainly, and don't forget that during this time frame, The consequences of substances were not known, and most of these substances were legal. I think she was a user of opium, don't quote me on it. She certainly had a preference apparently for laudanum, and apparently she's known to have chewed on cannabis chewing gum, um, allegedly to treat the symptoms of PMS, and apparently she enjoyed cannabis tea. As I said, my understanding is that she was a cocaine addict, but I can't remember where I learned it. I'm pretty sure I was at university at the time. What else do we know? She certainly didn't put any limitations on her own behaviour, and I don't know if it's a well-known fact, but apparently the Tsar of Russia and the Kaiser of Germany were competing for her affections around about the time World War One broke out. So I remember, because of my studies on human behaviour, if you like, I remember thinking, and I'm not saying this is, it's just something that crossed my mind. I remember asking myself, oh my God, honestly, did World War happen out of a case of family rivalry? You know, who wants to be the Queen's pet? Is it the Kaiser or is it the Tsar? You know? Anyway, I will leave you to think about that. I suspect that she certainly had behaviours that might indicate a lack of a conscience, shall we say. But, or even if she wasn't the Queen, we would not have a problem calling her a narcissist. But at the end of the day, she was the Queen. She was the head of a church. So to think that she was godly or godlike stands to reason. I think she also didn't have any issues with saying no to people, but I think she was very, very self-indulgent. That's the impression I get. I'm interested in your feedback. So, saving the worst till last. Right. Oscar Pistorius was a South African athlete, and he inspired the world because he was born with a congenital defect and he had both of his feet removed in infancy. He went on, if you're not aware of him, I'm just giving you an outline. He went on to become a famous sprinter, and he was raised in a wealthy white family. So, just giving you a background here. Okay, Oscar was charged and found guilty of murdering his then girlfriend during a very extremely violent outburst. Now, I've made the point earlier that the three can be quite explosive when they're enraged or when they've said yes too many times, but I want to be very clear that I am not saying this is the case, that threes are like Oscar, because Oscar's a special caliber, right? He's a class all of his own, and I wouldn't want to in any way infer that the victim has some level of blame for being murdered, especially the way that she was. We can see on his birth chart here that there is an overemphasis on the mind plane. Now, bearing in mind, pun, right? He's a ruling three anyway, so they're thinkers, right? He's very intelligent, he's very astute, he's very well able to direct his willpower. This is when living positively, of course. And then we look at his mind chart and we see that it's reinforced there on the mind plane. He's all about the mind, right? So then there is also on the birth chart, we can see that there are some insecurities and there's indicators of control issues, all right? We can infer here that there is a lack of boundary and self-discipline. And this is really interesting to me because he had to have had a lot of self-discipline to be able to achieve these athletic goals that he set himself as being a world-class sprinter and that kind of thing. But I think where things went wrong for him is while he had self-discipline in the practical pursuits and the earthly pursuits, when it comes to emotional, shall we say, regulation or self-discipline, emotionally and psychologically, he clearly hadn't mastered that. That hadn't been the emphasis of his life. Now, the other thing too is if he had poor impulse control on an emotional and psychological level, this would explain why he was using testosterone, because this came up in the trial that apparently large quantities of testosterone were found on the property after he killed her. Now, testosterone is apparently linked with increased aggression and volatility. So we see some explanation as to why his life has taken this pathway. What I see is that it all points towards him having paranoia, that he was fear-based, he was reactive, and all of this led to this explosive reaction on the night of the murder. She may have challenged him, and it might simply have been maybe she didn't respond quickly enough. It's not something that she's done. She hasn't made it happen. He's chosen his actions. He's chosen them quickly in the moment. And I wonder, I have a little bit of internal conflict here. There's another indicator on this chart, which is why I would say that this woman has not done anything to deserve. I mean, Blind Freddy knows that anyway. But there is an indicator on his chart that refers to violence. And I don't want to share exactly how I know this, because I know that when people get a snippet of information, they can really start judging others based on one small piece of information. It's like saying, oh, well, all people of X are drunks because of this. If I turn around and say to you how I know that violence is in his chart, people will be going like, oh my God, well, that person's got this in their chart, so therefore they must be violent. No, it's not as simple as that. There's other ingredients that go in with it. Now, in his instance, I would suspect that he has grown up with violence. Violence is not always about physical violence. Sometimes it's verbal, emotional, and psychological. I'd be very careful not to point my finger at his parents here. I mean, the guy was in training for many, many years as an athlete. It could have been a coach or whatever. I do know that some people refer to Oscar as a psychopath, and he may well be. I'm just talking about the numbers here, and I would just say, I guess, that whatever gifts he had, the outcomes of this scenario are a direct consequence of his lack of self-discipline, poor impulse control, poor personal boundaries, combined with his did you like that? I invented a new word. Anyway, combined with his own personal insecurities and his desire for power and control. There's a level of self-absorption in here as well. And then with the introduction of the testosterone, that will have escalated the paranoia that resulted in the death of a woman. This is just my perspective. He's also coming up for probation or something like that now. I think he's done about 20 years now. So there you go. I think this is going to be the longest ruling number video that I'm going to be putting up. I don't envisage any longer ones or any further videos taking as long as this one's done to deliver. But there was a lot to cover. So I actually, I'm going to leave you shortly. I'm going to say thank you for being part of the journey. Please do leave your own comments of your experiences with numbers down below. If there's somebody that you particularly want me to do a birth chart on or whatever in the next videos, because we're going to be looking at them, let me know, leave a comment, and I will be sure to try and accommodate. In the meantime, I wish you well. Have a wonderful, beautiful day. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Bless. Bye.